All right, everyone. I mentioned yesterday how we were probably going to get some leaders on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and FFG threw a curveball, and boom, we got a brand new leader to talk about today. So that's going to be pretty exciting. It looks like we are going to get maybe a little bit of a different spoiler schedule than we are used to, but I'm going to wait and see. Again, Tuesday, Thursdays was when we used to get leaders when spoiler season was happening, but we have one on Wednesday. So without further ado, big thank you to my patrons over on Patreon. We've been absolutely raving about all the new cards. It's been a ton of fun. And let's dive right into it with the brand new leader in Satine Kryze. For some reason, I always forget how the Clone Wars actually said the name. But anyways, we have Satine here, who is our leader that's going to be damaging herself. She's got this action to heal up to 2 damage from a unit if you do deal that much damage to your base in Vigilance Heroism. So we have a Vigilance leader that is going to be the best healing leader that we've seen so far. We've seen some leaders like Anakin, or we've seen a leader like Anakin where dealing damage to your own base for the payoff can be worthwhile depending on the situation. Now, what I think is interesting about this is the healing. I think they're really trying to push this mill deck. And if you remember, the other Satine that we have is the 0-8 that you can have all your units exhaust to mill half their toughness. So you can kind of keep them healed up with Satine. And then we have a 5 to deploy 0-8. Restore 4. That's the leader. 0-8 Restore 4 is obnoxious. That is a lot of healing and a lot to kind of deal with from your opponent. So your opponent's going to try to attack Satine, which means that this realistically will heal, I'm guessing, 6, 7, 8, 9 damage, and potentially even more. I mean, if you put something like, I wouldn't say entrench because then you'd have to hit units, but if you do put some upgrades on her and keep her alive with some, or maybe even some healing, like cure wounds or whatever, you are able to really restore an obnoxious amount. And, that could be very, very solid, but there isn't as many control payoffs, so I'm not really thinking that she'll be viable for that. Instead, well, like I said, harkening back to the Satine unit, I think they're really trying to push this mill style, so you can have all these high toughness units, constantly be healing them up, maybe dealing a little bit of damage to your base, but then milling out your opponent. I think it's interesting. There were a couple of kind of cool things with this. Of course, you have the same things that were good with like Obi-Wan or Rose Tico, with a lot of units that deal damage themselves, etc. That can do some good work in Satine. For example, is it Blue Squadron X-Wing? I forget the actual. It's an X-Wing that deals 2 or draws a card if you choose to deal 2. So cards like that are obviously going to be really good in Satine, and there is a lot of value in healing too, just straight up, no matter what. However, if you're trying to play this as like a value, I'm going to heal up some units, get some damage, I don't think that really fits all that well. Obviously it works against Tarkin Town, which is a nice thing, but Force Throw, Power of the Dark Side, your Force Lightnings, all those things are probably just going to kill your units anyways, and so I don't think healing's going to really be all that exceptional, especially when your leader doesn't actually provide any combat presence. It's just going to be more healing, and you're also not going to be really surviving all that much because that healing is going to be dealing damage to yourself. So I think there's got to be something else going on with this, and I'm curious to see if we're going to see any other units in set 6 that are actually going to give a real reason for this much healing. But we also have some cards to go over, and the first one is Arihnda Pryce. It's a 4-cost ground unit in Aggression Villainy. It's a 4/4 Imperial, and when she's defeated, you may defeat another friendly unit. If you do, deal 4 damage to each enemy base. So kind of on first glance, just a weaker K2SO is kind of how I view this. So 4 stat line, 4/4, same kind of aspects, just on the villainy side of things. It's got a when defeated trigger, just like K2SO, has the Imperial versus the Rebel tag, just like K2SO. And in this case, you get 1 extra damage, but you have to defeat another friendly unit. And in K2SO's case, it's just guaranteed no matter what. And you also have the option to make them discard. So just a little bit of a weaker K2SO. Defeating another friendly unit is actually kind of a restrictive condition, to be honest. Now, I think there's some cool things you could potentially do with this. I'm thinking like Thrawn 4, where you can put a droid missile platform and, all your normal Thrawn red stuff, and then just have all these when defeated triggers like the series officer and droid missile platform, and then Arihnda Pryce dies and you can double it up, defeat everything, and do like massive burn damage to your opponent. And you even have things like Ruthless Raider and Devastator to finish out the game, and for all those to double up, like you could do some really cool stuff with that. I think that's where I'm fitting Arihnda Pryce in. I think there could be some cool stuff. Like I said, the question is that cool stuff actually going to be viable? I don't think you're playing this in typical aggression villainy decks. Like, for example, Talzin Red is one of the premier aggression villainy, or Boba Green. I don't think you're playing Arihnda Pryce in either of those decks. I mean, I could see potentially like a Boba Fett playing it just because you are playing things like droid missile platform sometimes, or Ruthless Raider, and maybe you can do some really high burn damage since it is non-combat damage, so maybe you could trigger Boba Fett and do some cool things there. I'll hold out a little bit of hope for this one. I don't think this is going to be a very much prepare for type of card. You're not going to just slot this into a bunch of random decks. I think there's a little bit of potential here because K2SO is very powerful, and to be honest, although K2SO is a little bit stronger, I think Heroism doesn't have as many like straight up deal damage to your base type effects or like reach type of effects comparatively to villainy, so where villainy actually is a little bit more scarier on that right? Ruthless Raider, Devastator are the two kind of premier options. And of course, like I said, you have Boba Red or Boba Green rather, that has that indirect damage trigger flowing out. So that is Arihnda Pryce. We have Coronet as the next one. This one is a 5-cost space unit in Vigilance Heroism, 4/6 Mandalorian vehicle transport. It's got Restore 1, and each other friendly unit gains Restore 1. So obviously this is kind of prepping for your Satine leader. You get a nice Restorer, and you kind of get like this mini version of Home 1, except you don't get the extra unit coming around with it, right? So this unit seems okay. 5 resource, 4/6 isn't terrible. It's a pretty reasonable stat line. Restore 1 isn't really relevant enough, I'd say, at this point in the game, but giving every other unit Restore 1 makes your Satine, really restore quite a bit. And there might be some other, units out there that you can have on the board, potentially kept alive by Satine, and then really get some nice restoring going. This could be kind of an obnoxious, very obnoxious Vigilance Heroism deck. The only problem I see again is, if you are trying to play in like that more controlling style, this stall out restore style, things like Force Throw, Power That Arcside, Fellow the Dragon, all this type of stuff. Now, Fellow Dragon doesn't hit this, but there are so many just hard removal, depending on, what you're discarding or, what removal you're playing, that I don't see a ton of ways to keep everything alive here to get a ton of value. That said, I mean, this does have a lot of toughness and it doesn't get hit by Fellow the Dragon. 4/6 is kind of the perfect stat line. A 5/6 is actually tends to be weaker than a 4/6 in a lot of situations because it can get hit by Fellow the Dragon. So 4/6 is actually, like I said, a solid stat line, nothing to complain about. You're probably going to keep this around. It's going to be kind of tough to deal with. The only problem I see is like, this style of deck is so horrendous up against certain matchups that you just auto lose. For example, like let's say you're playing double blue Satine and you're trying to play this restoring go long game plan, and you find yourself up against things like potentially a Iden Green. Suddenly they can put a lot of pressure on you. You can't get any units down and keep them alive and go with your mill out strategy, and they're gonna have more cards in their deck than you if you're playing double blue. But even if you're playing like Satine Data Vaults and you're running Vigilance and you're trying to play the mill them out game with like Satine Kryze, for example, usually they're playing restocks and then they just have better threats in their deck and more removal. So it's like, ooh, I don't know about that, but maybe Coronet can do some good work here in conjunction with that Satine. Then we've got Grassroots Resistance. This is a 4-cost event in Heroism. Kind of an interesting one. We got deal 3 damage to a unit, heal 3 damage from your base. Honestly, not a bad event. I don't think this is necessarily something that I'm going to be wanting in my premier games. This 3 damage is significantly weaker than a lot of things that we have options for. Think of just like Sorceress Blast, for example. That's a 1 resource deal 3. Daring Raids, 1 resource deal 2. You don't even need the Force for that. Open Fire is 3 resource deal 4. Deal 3 is kind of a weak amount of damage at this stage in the lifespan of Star Wars Limited. There's a lot of turn 1 units that have 4 toughness now, so it doesn't even kill things on turn 2, especially since it's 4 cost. The heal 3 can be decent. Honestly, this looks more of like a limited card in draft, for example, but overall, you know, not the worst. I like the art. I think it's cool to see an event in heroism that's just like straight up deal 3 damage and heal 3. I mean, it's cool. I like the Ewoks, to be honest. And then lastly, we have a card that I'm actually pretty interested in. It's a 2-cost ground unit in Vigilance Heroism. Lots of things for Satine today. It's a 2/3 official, and it's got Restore 2. Very straightforward, potentially very powerful. Now, 2/3 stat line is weak, no doubt about it. But if you look at the current played cards, a lot of our turn 1 plays these days are 2/4s. HK, Karis, Secret of Sages is a 2/2, Yaddle, Adi Galea, all 2/4s. This thing lives up against 2/4s and is kind of annoying to deal with because it actually trades with 2/4s over the course of 2 attacks. And Restore 2 is a lot. Turn 1 Restore 2 is a lot. This actually has potential in, you know, the meta. I could see a couple different decks that may want to play this. Now, I don't think in the current state of the game, like Han Blue, for example, would want to play it necessarily. Maybe in like the Boba Data Vault matchup where they have a lot of indirect damage and getting a Restorer on turn 1 could be relevant. But to be honest, I mean, you could play Yoda on turn 1 with Han's ability. So, you know, there's not a ton of Vigilance Heroism decks that I would think that really want this. Anakin is the other one that's that force-based deck, but it's not a force unit in those decks, right? So I don't think you're fitting it in there. I think you're going to need some official synergy or some other deck that's not necessarily force-based that is looking to survive into the mid to late game. Because in heroism these days, there's a lot of options for, you know, some late game power that maybe this could be a playable option. Again, Restore 2 on turn 1 is a lot. We've already seen things like Yaddle do some good work just by restoring 1, 2, 3 over the course of the first few turns. So imagine restoring 6 in the first few turns of the game. I mean, that is incredible. And especially if you have Satine, I mean, maybe you get attack at a 2/4, you heal up your Chandrilan sponsor, and then you attack again, you heal it up, you're kind of negating the damage you're dealing, but you get kind of some free trades in. Maybe there's something there, but overall, I mean, Restore 2, 2, 3. If we were looking back in set 1, this would be a crazy card. It's definitely some power creep here because I remember the days when you were like, ooh, 3/3, that's insane. Now 3/3s are still good to this day, but 2/4s were kind of not even seen, and 2/3s were pretty regularly played. I mean, think like Rebel Pathfinder or Colonel Yularen or things like, what was another 2/3 that the Cunning decks played? I forget off the top of my head from set 1, guys. It's been a long time, but it's crazy to me that this is where we're at. You can definitely see some power creep flowing into the game these days, and this is a perfect example, right? It's not like exceptionally broken or anything, and I don't think this is necessarily a bad thing. I think power creep is something that can be done really tastefully, and to be honest, this is one of those ones where I think it is done tastefully because I don't think it's going to be like a staple or anything. But a 2/3 Restore 2 is really powerful to see compared to my old Star Wars Limited brain that's still stuck in set 1 days sometimes. But let me know what you think in the comment section down below about all these new cards, whether or not Chandrilan sponsor is actually going to be a 2-cost unit that you play. Grassroots Resistance. What about Coronet and Pryce? What about Pryce? Do you think you're going to have to play a Thrawn 4 deck that gets some when defeated triggers going? And of course, Satine. Can we finally play our mill deck in the game yet? Can we do it? I've tried with Satine, by the way. You probably haven't. I don't know if I've posted a video. I can't remember if I've posted a Satine video, and not the leader, by the way, because we don't have a leader. That's Satine. We just have the unit, the 0H. But I've played so many games trying to make that thing work, and it just doesn't do it. It just doesn't do it. I mean, the better mill deck is like Arihnda Data Vaults, like I played it the other day, going full events and trying to build people out with Vigilance. And even that's difficult. And that's with things like Power of the Dark Side, Merciless Contest. Heroism doesn't get those stuff. Like, you Hello There, which is so much worse than Power of the Dark Side, to where I haven't been able to get Satine to work. So maybe we could do some cool things with a 0-8 Restore 4. But let me know in the comment section down below, and I will see you all for a video tomorrow.